The ItemQuantity class currently has a circular dependency on one of the services, the item factory, to get the item's name. Once we move the projects to their new homes, the SOSCSRPG.models and .services projects, we can't have that circular dependency. So that's one of the things we're going to fix in this lesson. So we'll open up the solution. The first thing we'll do is a simple one. We're going to move the logging service from the engine project to the services project. While looking at the services, I saw we could do that. There's no dependencies in the logging service, so that's a quick, easy one. We can just cut and paste from the services folder in engine into the SOSCSRPG services project. Then we need to go into the logging service, and we will fix its namespace like we did with the other classes we moved. Change it to SOSCSRPG.services. This service is only used in one place, the app.xaml.cs class. So we need to go into there in the WPF UI project and change the using directive from engine services to SOSCSRPG services. So now it will match the updated namespace here in the logging service. Now with that one out of the way, we will go and fix the ItemQuantity class. We'll go into engine models, and before we used to pass in the constructor we would pass in the ID for the game item, and in the quantity item description we would call the game factory the get name function there. Now we're going to pass in a whole game item object, store that in this new backing variable, and then we'll have item ID, and here the name and the description property will pull from that game item backing variable. Now we have to go into the rest of the classes that we're instantiating or using the ItemQuantity object and fix those to work with the new structure. The first one will be the quest factory in engine factories, and we'll go down to the load quest from nodes function. And before, on what's now line 43 and 50, we would add the items to complete and the reward items for the quest by passing in the item ID. What we'll do now is we'll instantiate an item object by calling the item factory and passing in the ID, and then we'll pass in the full item object to the ItemQuantity. So that matches our new constructor for ItemQuantity. And we'll do that for both the items to complete the quest and the reward items. Next we'll go into the recipe class, and in here we used to have two functions to add the ingredients and add the output items. What we'll do now is we'll pass those in as parameters on the constructor, and we'll just store those values into the properties. We'll also get rid of the old default instantiated value. We used to have this for the ingredients, but now since we're passing in the ingredients, we can just set the value here in the constructor, and we don't need this. And since we changed the recipe class's constructor, we need to go into the recipe factory. And here in the load recipes from nodes function, we'll do the same type of thing we did with the quest factory. Instead of passing in the ID for ItemQuantity, we now have to pass in a full game item. So we'll just have this temporary variable that we instantiate from the ID and pass that in for both the ingredients and the output items for the recipe. Next we'll go into the engine view models game session class, and down here on line 282 inside the craft item using function, we used to raise a message with the quantity and the name. Since that's in the item quantity item description property, this one here where we already concatenate the quantity with the name, we're just going to replace the old code that called the game item factory to get the name with this property. So now this will display just like it did before, the quantity, and the game item's name. And the last code change is in the item factory. Now that we are not getting the name using the item factory, since we're passing the full game item into the item quantity object and we have the name available, we can get rid of the item name function that used to be here on lines 39 to 42. Final step, as always, will be to do a clean, do a rebuild, make sure we don't get any errors, and then run the game. And the important thing we want to check is that the item quantity works correctly. So if we look in recipes, this uses, when we hover over the recipe, this displays the item quantity of the ingredients in the output items, and that's still correct. I'll go ahead and craft that. And we'll go north so we get the quest. And if we look in the quest, that's another place where we use item quantity, the items to complete the quest and the reward. And that's still working. So it looks good. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below the video or on the support page, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.